That took me so much longer to set up than usual. But now we got all our pieces actually in here. And our internet is working, so we don't have lag. Not that it was the internet's fault. I had to restart my computer before stream, so it's been running. But that's okay. It's all better. And now we're finally back to working on Jackalope. So we got all of our paw pieces over here. Since we finished his noggin yesterday, which you can't see because he's up on the shelf back there. Should probably actually bring him. I wish I had a way to display him like right here. That wouldn't have him in my way. I need to figure out like a good shelf system or something. Do some rearranging in here. Probably not though, because I like this shelf. It works really, really well. And it doesn't really fit anywhere else in the office. That's the downside of getting so specific with your shelving. Oh well. And of course, there we go. All betters. These paws are actually fairly complicated. Past me decided it was going to be a good idea to make these the way they are. Current me is upset with past me, but that's usually the case. Current me is always upset with past me. But that's okay. Because we have fingies. Since he is a rabbit though, so it's a little bit harder to tell with these pieces because he doesn't have any toe beans. Because rabbits naturally don't have toe beans. They just got fuzzy little feetses. So all I did was shave down his toes because I still want them to be shorter. Because that'll help prevent matting and such. I did not shave his palm because I thought that might be a little weird, especially since rabbit feet are fairly fluffy. And I didn't shave the backs of his fingers because, again, rabbit feet are fairly fluffy anyway. But with this fur, if I actually shave the fur down too short, it is just straight up white underneath. So then we just have white fingers, and we don't want that. So we're gonna have nice, flat, smoothish bottoms with fluffy tops, which isn't awful. And then there's a nice variety too to like the color patterns of the fingers. We got some more blue ones, we got some pink ones. There's one on here actually that was insanely pink. This one's all pink and purple. That'll look cool next to the other fingies. I want to try to kind of match them up a bit when I put them together. So that way there's like more of a gradient across the fingers so it looks like it came from the same pattern of fur. Because they were, you know, cut down the fabric and not horizontally across it because of fur direction. So I want to try to get the color pattern to match up as best as I can with each of the fingers and the backs of the hand paws. We'll find out though, we'll figure it out. It'll get there. On top of that, this isn't technically the full design for these paws yet. They're also going to have spots on these pieces and these pieces. They're going to have little blue spots. Those are going to be sewn in with a yarn needle because that's probably going to be the easiest way for me to do it with long fur, since neither of these are shaved down. So he's going to be a very floofy suit. Very floofy. Brain hole. I don't have one. Okay, cool. My brain disappeared on me, but that's okay. I am hoping to get these done before the weekend, but I highly doubt it. Because I'll be getting the suit I need to do a refurb on, which is next in my queue this weekend. And finally we'll be starting that. We've been planning that for well over a year. And then they were finally able to actually commission me for it. But then, even though I had a slot open for an earlier time frame for them, he had to go do some work training. So he's finally done with his training, and he'll be able to communicate with me better about what he wants with his refurb and stuff. So yeah. We'll finally get started on that this weekend. But since this is... I've been working on this Premade for a while as well. This Premade has been going for several months at this point. I believe I started it back in March? No, April. I might have started it before that, but I know at the latest April. I'm trying to think, honestly. It's not like it's been sitting around for years, but I started it, and then instead of being able to finish it like I'd originally planned, things came up, and I had to travel, and I had to do things. And then commissions, their time slots came up, and I'm not gonna push back a commission for a Premade. So the Premade's just been waiting for its turn. And I finally was able to set up a time specifically to work on the Premade for August, but I'm hoping to get it finished early since I have time now between commissions while we wait to I'm hoping to finish this before August. Because then that means I can bump up all of my commissions in the queue by about a month. Because I booked out the entire month for the Premade. Which I didn't think I would need, but I figured that would give me a bit of a breather since I originally had events planned in that month as well. Some of which fell through. So, you know, we're working with what we got, trying to be as efficient as possible. That's the biggest thing. It's like, I don't want to keep people waiting, and if I can, you know, finish this earlier and be able to bump my queue up, that's great, you know, why wouldn't I? So, because then I won't be on so much of a time crunch. These, I decided for these paws, right, because I wanted to follow the design that was on the face for the Premade. In fact, actually, I'll go get the head and bring it over, just so I can show you guys what I'm talking about. We've got, like, these circular patterns, these ringed circular patterns. on the face and ears. And like they're kind of, you know, an outline with dots in the middle is kind of the overall pattern we have going with the blue. Because the blue is like our detail color, since I didn't have a whole lot of it to use. I don't know that I have any of that detailing on the tail for this Premade. I can't see the reference sheet very well from here. But I think it adds a vibe to the character. I don't know what kind of vibe, but it adds a very specific detail. And it's, of course, not sitting properly on the Ed head at the moment because the Ed head is slippery. Here, let's... adjust that friend. And there he goes again. Normally I will tape head straps oftentimes just to keep them from slouching forward like that. It's usually not as much of an issue on the Ed heads, or even especially on people's heads. It's not as much of an issue to have them slouching forward. It doesn't really happen because you can actually adjust the head strap properly, and it's not, you know, people aren't made of slippery plastic. But he keeps sliding because he's got all that poof on the back of his head, and that is just stiff enough to actually push his head forward and slide that strap off. So even when the strap's on, he's kind of slouching all the time. So then he looks a little evil down there, like a little gremlin. But we're trying to follow those patterns, and the design, if you can see on a little tiny reference sheet in the corner, not sure how well you can see that. In fact, actually, let me see how well I can see it. Scrolling. I gotta sneeze. Hold on. I exploded a little bit. Alright. But if you look at the little reference sheet down in the corner, it's probably too small for you guys to see, but I'll blow it up for a second. Ooh. This is what the hand paws are gonna look like. We've got this kind of ring situation with small dots on the hands. And that's just to follow that pattern that we already established on the face. Because my big thing is, like, I like to try and keep a design recurring. I like to try to keep some sort of element that follows through on the suits. And that's just me personally. Like, I don't think suits have to do that. I just think it makes partials look like they go together, you know? Like, I think it'd be really silly to have this bunny with all this detail on his face and stuff have solid purple hand paws. You know? Like, it wouldn't look bad, but it'd be kind of silly. Specifically just for, like, my pre-made partials. Full suits, it's not so much a thing. Like, I do have a few artistic liberty designs that I'm really excited for, that I really want to do eventually. And like, a lot of them have that same kind of feature where there's something that ties in the hands, the feet, the tail, the bodysuit, and the face all together, you know? Something recurring in the overall design. Aside from color palette. But there's a couple suits where it's not so much, it's usually the fandom suits actually, where there's not necessarily a recurring design, but there's the color palette and maybe some details on each piece, if that. And I feel like those honestly are my better designs, which now that I think about it, I don't know if I took the one. I did sell one of those designs. And I'm really, really, really hoping I get the chance to turn that into a suit in the future. Because that would be so much fun to do. Like, I would die. Honestly. I would love, absolutely love, I would explode if I got the chance. Like, just, yes! I want to make it. And that's true for all of my artistic liberty designs. Like, to some extent, I really, really do want to make those designs, which is why they're there as the pre-made designs. Like, I currently have a Detroit Become Human design that I really, 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 really like and would love to have. Like, there are twin suit designs, because there's one for the RK800 and one for the RK900 models. Because I'm nerdy like that, and I like the idea of having both. And I feel like if I'm going to make one, I have to make the other. So I would love to make them as twin suits. That's kind of a requirement for that, is even if the same person doesn't buy both of them, they both have to be made at the same time, so that way they are identical to each other overall, you know, like, at least for the heads, because that's the biggest detail. The heads need to be identical. The hand paws need to be identical, because they're going to use the same pattern anyway. The feet paws. And then, like, as far as the bodysuit goes, there's going to be some variation just because people vary, you know? Granted, like I said, if it's the same person getting both designs, then it'll be identical. But if it's two different people, you know, I want them both to be the same style of suit. So either a plantigrade or a digigrade for both suits. But they're going to have some variation just because people are different in height and body structure overall. So while one person might need just thigh and ankle padding, and they don't necessarily need rear padding to get that leg shape that I like, that I do in my suits, another person might, for example me, because I have no butt. Therefore, if I get a suit, I have to give myself butt padding to get the proper leg shape for my digi-legs. But I would love to make those as twin suits, and I think they'd be super fun. And there's, like, little details that I really want to do in them. Like, I want to do a functioning LED ring that would change colors, and that would probably be the hardest part for me personally, because I am not good with electronics. I don't know too much about doing electronics. I do very little at the moment. But I want to get into it more, and I want to do more of it. But if I'm going to put permanent electronics in a suit that is not removable, I need it to be fully waterproofed. And if it's not fully waterproofed, then it has to be removable, because I want it to be able to be washed without being ruined, you know? Which is the big reason why I finally switched over to sublimation for the eyes in my fursuits. So now my fursuit heads are waterproof to an extent. You know, like, obviously they're going to get wet, it's going to soak into the foam. And water in fur makes it heavier and puts stress on the seams and stuff like that, but getting it soaking wet in the tub when you're cleaning it is not gonna hurt anything, you know? Like, it's not gonna make paint run, it's not gonna cause dye to bleed. Everything will be okay if it gets wet, you know? So that's my big thing, is trying to make them more durable and easier to keep and wear. Because that's my big annoyance with wearing my personal suits, especially my older ones, is that I go out, I wear them, you know, I go to an outdoor meet, or I go to a convention, I'm running around all weekend, so my suits get sweaty and stinky and dirty from being outside, and then I have to wash them. And it's a pain in the butt to wash a full suit. Like, currently, I am not a fan of Patch's bodysuit at the moment. Not because it's a bad bodysuit. It's a great 3/4 suit. But the padding is built in. It's polyfill and it's zippered in. But the issue that leaves me with is every time I want to wash him, I have to unstuff him to fit him in the washer. Which then means I have to restuff him and readjust to make sure all of the padding is where it's supposed to be, and there isn't a part that's over or understuffed on his bodysuit. Which I really don't like, you know, I think that's really annoying to do for my full suits. So I'm going to find a way to, I say find a way, I already know how I'm going to do it, for future 3/4 suits where the padding is not built in, because I have found it distinctly easier to have separate padding pieces for each thigh and each ankle and have to put them in than the built-in padding for legs. And like a lot of people argue, oh well, it's easier because then you just step into it. But most of the time, I go to step in and my feet catch on the fabric in the leg. And then I'm tripping over myself trying to step in because my foot is stuck, you know? It really isn't any easier with or without the built-in padding. And that kind of sucks, you know? Like, I'm not a huge fan of that. So I really, really am hoping that eventually when I get around to making Patch another bodysuit, because I do want him to be a full suit again and not just a 3/4. I miss full suiting. But when I get around to that, I do want to do separate padding for his legs and not the built-in. Because I personally prefer it. It's much, much easier to clean, and that's the biggest, most annoying part for me with my suits, is being able to clean them. And these days, I'd argue that for most of the bodysuit, most of the fursuit, you could toss in the washing machine. Like the hand paws, the feet paws, as long as they're unstuffed, the tail, the bodysuits. You could toss those all into the washing machine on a gentle cycle. I personally do. But I have also found that it is causing more wear and tear on the fur fabric itself over time. So it's easier, but it's definitely going to cause your suit to wear down faster. Which is why when people ask me how to clean their suits, I say I still recommend hand washing, either with the little green or in the tub. Over washing in the washing machine, but pretty much everything aside from fursuit head can go in the washing machine. Granted, there are exceptions to this rule, very few and far between. Like, there's some suits that have, again, like my older suits that have the non-waterproof eye mesh, or the older suits that have the weaker thread, probably won't hold up as well in the washing machine. Suits that don't have removable mouth fans obviously need to be more careful when washing them. And suit heads in general, I do not recommend putting in the washing machine, just because it is entirely possible that, while depending on what kind of washing machine you have and stuff like that, that you will either deform or ruin, break the fursuit head in the tub, in the washing machine. Because even on gentle cycles, washing machines are still rough. Like, I have a top loader washing machine that has the center part in the middle, the vertical pole in the center part of the machine. It's an older style machine. A lot of the modern ones don't have that. But my fursuit heads would not fit in those easily. Like, you could technically squish them into it, but then you're putting water and swishing it around while it's smushed into parts of your machine. And as I found with like plush pillows and stuff that were made with similar fabrics, oftentimes when they get squished into parts of the machine that have the holes, it will pick up dirt smears and debris that are wedged into those because the shapes will conform into that because of the foam and the polyfill. Which you obviously don't want on your fursuit head. And with most parts of your fursuit, I recommend putting them inside of a pillowcase or a clothing bag for washing when you toss them in the washing machine. Just to keep those stains from happening, because first, washing machines do get dirty. They do get gross. They just be that way. But like this guy, especially, I would not recommend ever putting him in a washing machine, even if it's a front load, even if it's a top load that doesn't have the center portion, because of his 3D printed parts. Not because they would be damaged from getting wet, but because this part here, you don't want it to be tumbling in the washing machine or spinning aggressively and catching in the side of the washing machine and then being ripped out of the fursuit head aggressively. You know, like if something happens where it just happens to get stuck, it's better safe than sorry to not toss these in the washing machine. Because like I said, washing machines are really rough on fursuits. Just overall, like, it pulls the fur from the fabric, it's gonna wear it down quicker over time than hand washing. And it's really not recommended, even though I try to make my seams as durable as possible. Because while the seams themselves will be fine, the fabric and other parts might not be. Because like that horn is not necessarily sewn in per se, as much as it is glued to the foam base and the fur is glued over top of it snugly around the base of the horn. Like the actual base of the horn is about this wide, and the fur comes up over that. And it's glued on extremely well, but with enough force, it could be ripped off, you know, and that's true for pretty much anything, you know, with enough force, anything can be damaged. That's just the way it is, unfortunately. Sorry, I'm trying to find where these end, per se. But yeah, so like I'm always trying to make them easier to maintain and clean. Another big thing when I make my suits, I try to make them comfortable to wear. Like fursuiting should not be miserable. I feel like there's some people that are the whole beauty is pain type deal, and to have a nice suit is to be uncomfortable, or difficult, at least. You know, like it's going, like, oh, well, if you're in a fursuit, you have to be super hot and sweaty constantly, or you're gonna have breathing and vision issues because it's a fursuit head, you know. And sometimes that is the case. There are some species where that sort of, some of those details are just part of the truth, you know. Like if you have a species that doesn't have a mouth, if you don't put extra ventilation in, it's going to have issues as far as getting really hot inside the fursuit heads and breathability. If you have a species like a bird that has a large beak right between the eyes, you are going to have issues as far as front visibility goes. And sometimes even with beaks as well, because of the fact that the hook overlaps. The top part of the beak overlaps the bottom. You will get some breathability issues. Though I find that the cockatiel I did is fairly breathable. That's pretty. The cockatiel I did is fairly standard breathability for my suits. It turned out really well, and I'm really glad for that because that was something I was worried about. And like I said, for this guy, that is an issue that we are running into now that he's stuck, because rabbits have such small muzzles. He does have a smaller mouth. And then on top of that, his smaller mouth is pushed up more into a more closed position by his fluff. So, despite being really floofy and cute, breathability isn't necessarily the best in this suit, simply because he's got poof. But if you remove some of that poof, you can get better breathability. So at that point, it's up to the wearer whether or not they want better comfort or more poof, because this is one of those cases of you can't have both, unfortunately. As much as I would like for him to have both, you simply can't, you know. And same goes for like the cockatiel. As much as I would like for the cockatiel to have the best vision in the world, you can't have both. So I just gave it the best I could. I gave both of them the best I could for each of those. And it is what it is, you know? So I always try to give my suits the best vision possible and the best breathability possible. I try to make them waterproof. I try to make them, you know, durable, easy to maintain, easy to keep. I am trying my best all the time. 110% all the way, which is not necessarily healthy, as I've been told many, many times. But, you know, it's art. And I hate the idea that when I sell a suit to somebody that they don't like it. Or that they end up being like, I love this character, I love the way the suit looks, but I just don't like wearing it. You know, I've been that way with some of my personal suits, and I've actually rehomed a suit over it before, just because wearing it was not ideal for me. There were a lot of things with it where it didn't fit me properly. It didn't have the vision that I wanted. It was very breathable, but it did not have the vision that I wanted, among some other details that personally I just didn't like. But otherwise it was a perfectly fine suit, and I ended up having to sell it because I simply could not. You know, I don't see the point in keeping a suit that I'm not going to wear, you know, even if I love that character. I only have so much space for suits, I can't keep them as decoration, unfortunately. As much as I would like to, I cannot. So I always try to make it so that way people love their suits through and through, you know, like, it's not just a commission, it's not just a fursuit. This is my little fur child, as I sometimes call them, my little fur children running around. The suits I do as pre-mades and the suits I do as commissions are all very special to me. They really are. I like to see them out and about, you know. And like, not everybody has the money to go to cons and stuff, or like events all the time, so a lot of people just don't wear their suits that often simply because they don't have the time or the money to, and that's perfectly okay. I know I don't wear Patch very often. I wear him maybe 6 times a year, and that's probably being generous, but I absolutely love it when I'm watching a fursuit parade from a con that I'll probably never get a chance to go to, or I see photos and videos from an event, or I see a video on TikTok posted by someone, and I see in the videos or the photos or the posts that my little fur children are still out there, you know, that my suits are still being loved and worn and taken on adventures and doing things, you know, like, they're out there living the dream, and they're not in a landfill somewhere, you know. That's my biggest fear, is that someone gets a fursuit and maybe they can't keep it or whatever, you know, for whatever reason, and it goes to somebody else, and that somebody else doesn't care about it, or isn't a furry, so they trash it, or worst case scenario, I didn't make a suit well enough, so it simply didn't stay together in some aspects, and rather than telling me and letting me fix it, it gets tossed, just thrown away. And that's my biggest fear, is that either the suits get ruined and are irreparable, or are simply gone. Like, I've seen videos in the past of people burning suits, and a lot of them were people's personal suits that they made themselves, and they were like, I decided to burn it, which is not great for the environment. But that's not as sad as people stealing a fursuit and just setting it on fire because they want to hurt people. Like, that's devastating. So when I see these photos and these videos of suits I've made 3 years ago, running around out and about, still looking like the day they were first finished, or at least close to it, because, some suits do get a little scrunkly over time, especially my older suits, because I didn't, know the things then that I do now as far as shaving and fur quality and stuff like that. Like, Patch 1.0 is very scrunkly. He is a horror show. He's ugly. But he's still alive, He's still okay. And, like, I like seeing photos and videos. Like, I'll occasionally see videos from out in California of suits that I sent out there. I'll see photos from out there. A suit I made was recently in a Pride parade. They went to a Pride event, and they were running around in that, and it makes me very happy to see that, to see that it's still being loved and cared for. So I really like getting to see pictures and stuff and getting little updates from my suits. It's even better when I happen to be at an event or a con and a suitor that I don't expect to be there is there. Like, there was a couple times where I saw suits that I had sold months ago at, like, MFF or MCFC, even more local cons. Suits that I didn't even think were in this state at events near me. And I'm like, oh my god, it's you! You're alive! Yay, you're wearing the you're like, like, I assume that people who wear my suits clearly like them, at least to some extent, if they're wearing them, So it's like, yes, you're wearing it, he looks so good, he's still holding up, I'm glad, like, it makes me happy when that happens. And I like seeing my suits out and about in the wild doing things. What breaks my heart more than not knowing where my suits are is knowing that something has happened to them. This is a very silly song to play during this speech, during my ramble about my suits. Like, I'll occasionally get an email from a suit I made, years ago, back when I was using lower quality materials and stuff. And they'll be like, hey, I popped a seam. And I'll be like, gosh, dang it. I will happily fix that in a heartbeat. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when I sell a suit, if it's a simple fix, and it's something that wasn't supposed to happen, especially if it's a suit that's brand new, like if you got a new suit and something for whatever reason comes off and it definitely wasn't supposed to, I will happily fix that for free. Like, there is absolutely no reason that a new suit should be falling apart or having issues. So I try very hard to keep things working well. So, like, when I get updates from people and like, oh, hey, like, I know my suit's getting older, but I think this seam might be popped or something like that. It's like, oh, well, if you're nearby, we can meet up. Or, if you're not nearby, it's like, well, send it in to me, and I will happily fix it and send it back, and sometimes, like, shipping's expensive, so people don't always want to mail me their suit parts to get fixed if they do have issues. Some people will, just to get them updated, like, they'll see, oh, well, now I have the waterproof eye blanks, but their suit doesn't, because their suit was made before I figured out how to do that. So they'll be like, can I get the new eyes? Can you take my old ones out and replace them? And I'm like, yeah, sure, you know, like, we work something out, and they mail it in, and I update them, whatever. That part's not necessarily free, but, you know, like... But if they're not willing to send in their fursuit parts to get fixed, I will happily tell them how I would personally fix it and how I recommend to fix it. Like, some of my older suits, especially with the built-in shoes in particular, shoe bottoms do not like hot glue, as I have discovered. So some of my older shoes that were hot glued in, and only hot glued in, have not held up well over time, unfortunately. So I switched to using E6000 for built-in shoes on my feet paws. And so far, I have had no issues with people's feet staying in the shoes. But I usually recommend, because like people aren't willing to pay $30 to mail in their feet paws because the shoes came loose, you know. So I usually recommend, like, hey, get some E6000. It's like $5 for a big bottle of it. You can get a little one even, depending on if both feet are loose or if it's just one. So you get even cheaper. Definitely cheaper than shipping, you know. And I recommend just gluing that in on the bottom. And replacing the shoe. And that's usually easy enough. Some shoes it's easier. Some of my feet paws it's easier. Some of my older feet paws it's not, because I switched to stuffed feet from foam feet before I switched from hot glued shoes to E6000 shoes. Which is kind of funny to think about. But you know, there's a lot that goes into the stuff I do, and it breaks my heart whenever I feel like I don't do it well enough. You know, like, I don't want to disappoint people. I really, really don't. And the last thing I want is to spend literal hundreds of hours working on a suit, send it out, and then find out it doesn't fit right. Or something came off of it, or, you know, there's details that I didn't do right, or I've forgotten a specific detail that they wanted, you know. Which, granted, I'm usually pretty good about writing down the details because I know I'll forget otherwise. And I try to double check patterns and stuff with commissioners to make sure I get them right. So that's not usually an issue I have, but as far as the things fitting, every once in a while I do have an issue where I don't know what it is. I think it's duct tape dummies, honestly. Sometimes when duct tape dummies are made, they kind of shrink wrap on themselves. They kind of shrink. But in particular in the arms, and I think it's because the arms are such a small area. So oftentimes people will pattern their arms, and for whatever reason these painter suits will shrink on the arms. Or worse yet, they'll pattern their arms and they only go down to here. You know, or, you know, they don't go all the way to their wrist. Which is always, always, always what I recommend. Go all the way down to the bottom of your thumb, like straight to your wrist. Not part way up your arm, not just past your elbow, always to your, as far as you can go. Because that's how you're going to get the best fit on a suit from a duct tape dummy. And that's true for most makers, I believe. I don't know of any makers that don't do that. But every once in a blue moon, it's happened twice. It's only happened twice. But it still baffles me every time. 'Cause I follow the duct tape dummy. And of these times, not only do I follow, of the second time specifically actually, not only did I follow the duct tape dummy, I extended the arms a little bit past the ends because I like to have an overlap with the hand paws and the arm sleeves. And usually, if I suspect that a duct tape dummy has shrunken the arms, I will ask for a measurement of the commissioner's arms from the top of the shoulder to the wrist. And if it doesn't match the dummy, then I'll extend it even further, you know. because that's always my biggest concern, is whether or not things fit properly. But there was one time where, despite doing all of that, you know, like I didn't suspect that the arms were too short, but I did extend them anyway, because I like to have that little extra fabric just in case, and then if it's too much, they can trim it down. If it's not enough, well, that's only happened once. It's only been not enough once. And it was not enough by like 6 inches, which baffles me. And I was like, listen, give me one more day, come back tomorrow, because it was for pickup. They're luckily local enough that they could. I was like, I will have these done. I was like, I will add extensions to them, because like I had seen them on the person, and I was able to see how much I needed to actually extend them to fit over top of the hand paws like they were supposed to be. And so I extended them, and the suit fits fine now. And I was later able to, I actually have a photo of them with one of my other little fur children from MFF. And it fits them, and everything works great. Like, it's so nice to see my suits out and about. But that's always my biggest worry, is that people won't like them or they won't fit. Especially, like, for commissions. You know, like, for premades, I'm not so worried about people not liking them, because I make premades for me more so than I do for others. Like, this rabbit is just because I found that colorful fur. This rainbowy, honestly, I think it's kind of ugly fur at Joann's, and it looks a lot better. Like, right now it's a little scrumpled, but once you get it nice and brushed out, it doesn't look half bad. And I like using different materials. You know, I like to play with the materials I use in suits. I've done suits that have crochet in them. I've done suits that have gold detailing in them. I've done suits that have plants on them. You know, like multiple suits actually. Like the cockatiel that I did has faux pampas on them. And I use those to do the crest on the cockatiel, so that way the crest would stay upright, but it would also, you know, have some dynamic to it, because that's a thing I personally really like in my suits, is to have something that kind of moves, flops around. Like Patch's suit, he's got a lot of crochet detailing, but he also has yarn hair, so when I tilt my head, his hair also flops around because it's all yarn. But I like to do the little details like that, where suits are just unique in their own little ways. You know, like I like to play with the material and what I can get away with. Like I do want to do a suit that has tattoos, or a suit that has piercings and like different styles of fur and stuff. Like I have a design in mind that I might put up as an artistic liberty design. Because I also want to play with like the cartoonish style, right? Like I do a fairly toony style for my fursuits. Prime example, Patch is a really good example. So I want to play with that, you know, like I want to do suits that have exaggerated features. Like I want to do suits that have large muzzles, or like I have this particular, like I said, materials, right? Before Joann's went out of business, before my personal Joann's near me went out, they had like 60% off on their fur fabrics. And they had this stuff, which I got in blue and green. And it is exploding still, because they cut their furs rudely, so it's just shedding like crazy right now. But it's not so much a fur as much as it is like a fleece almost. Like it has a pile. It's really just a super long minky. And it gives very like Muppet vibes, you know, plushy vibes, stuffed animal vibes. So, like, I think this would be really good to do on, like, a plush style suit. And I would like to play with this along with some other furs to maybe do a shorter pile fur suit. Oh my goodness, when I tell you this is exploding, I am not kidding. Fur sheds, but this stuff is... Oh. Oh. Now I gotta get it back into the tote. Gosh darn it. That's what I get for getting sidetracked. Get in there. But yeah, I really should peel that fur fabric one of these days to get all the loose bits off of it. The loose tufts. But I really want to make a suit with that. That's kind of just plushy. And, you know, like I have many ideas for different suits I could make. For either pre-mades or artistic liberty suits. And I really want to see how far I can push what I can do. And there are some things that I definitely can't do right now. Like, there are some, like electronics. You know, electronics is not a thing that I am particularly anywhere near doing, really, aside from very simple, basic things. But like a jackalope? A themed pastel kind of jackalope. This is cute, and I had like this is pushing for me. Not a whole lot, but it is trying something new. Pretty much every pre-made I have done is to try something new, especially my recent ones. For example, this guy. First off, he's got a horn. I've done suits that have antlers. I haven't done ones that have horns before, per se. Specifically not 3D printed ones. So it's very nice to be able to do a 3D printed horn. But he's also got white felt, actually, which is not pushing any sort of envelopes as much as it is just opening it up and being like, huh, that's something I can do. But he's got the neck poof that, you know, was something that I wanted to try. And it turned out very well. It's definitely something I would do again. Maybe a little bit differently from how I did it. I don't think I did it the easiest way possible. But I definitely did it, and it worked. So I can't complain. But the species. I have never made a rabbit fursuit before. Of any sort. I've never done any sort of bunny or rabbit. So doing the jackalope was kind of testing how well I could actually get that structure that I wanted and that shape. Because I do find that I am better at some shapes than I am at others. Like, I made a dragon pre-made a while back. And that one was really for fun. It was to use up the rainbow fabric I had. I still have some of it up top, just in case, thankfully. But I wanted to do a giant tail, so like I did a huge tail with that. And I mean, I guess that one had 3D printed horns on it. So again, this one's really not pushing any envelopes as far as that goes. So I was able to put horns on it. I was able to do, you know, colors and stuff like that, and play around with the color palettes with the rainbow fur. Why is this the way it is? Sorry, I'm struggling right now. I'm just gonna, I don't know what this thread is doing, but it sure is doing it. So we're just going to go like so. Oh, big stretch from the baby mans. Oh, good lord, what are you doing? What? Thread. Okay. Not a clue what any of that was about. Right. Oh, big stretch. Yeah. Are you starving? Are you starving to death? It's not time. It's not. You have a little bit yet. You have to wait. You do. Yeah, you gotta wait. But like it had a 7-foot tail, 8-foot tail, which I believe is my longest tail to date. Not my chonkiest, but I believe it is my longest tail. And the dragon looks a lot like a duchy dragon. Like you could tell it's a dragon pre-made, you know? But I wouldn't say that I'm the best at making dragon species. But I was also going for a very rounded, cutesy, you know, style. I wasn't going for traditional American style dragon. Sorry, I'm just feeling like I maybe didn't sew. But I did not, did I? I sure didn't. Alright, cool beans. I'm like, man, this piece is sitting real weird. That's alright. We'll just start over. I didn't number any of these pieces because I didn't think I would need to. And I thought I was right, but as it turns out, no. I don't know what I'm doing. And, like, that's the thing. There isn't, like, a college degree for this, you know. There might be overseas. There isn't here. You know, like, there's... You can't get a degree in fursuit making. Costume design, maybe, but... And there aren't... There's a lot of tutorials art out there, but there's not, like, a lot of hands-on with an instructor type classes for making suits. So a lot of it really, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. That obviously goes there. It's like putting the wrong puzzle piece in the slightly wrong spot, so you're like, man, that looks right, and then you find out later, why does it look weird? Because it doesn't actually go there. But there's no real teaching for making fursuits. A lot of it is just seeing what you can do. So a lot of my pre-mades are trial and error. They're usually me pushing the boundaries. Like I said, this guy's a whole new species. I did a skull dog recently. I'd never done a skull dog before. I really, really wanted to print a fursuit head on my 3D printer. So I did that. I may or may not try doing a TPU base at some point. The issue I have with 3D printing head bases is that they are very hard to get sized properly, if you ask me. You good? I'm over here whipping around. I don't know what he's all about. Yeah, you're a good boy. Were you over there trying to eat that bird? You being a good boy not eating it. He has a thing about eating fur tufts. So I think he's trying very hard to do a leave it. But, I personally have trouble with 3D printing fursuit heads. And getting them sized properly for, you know, actually being able to wear them. Especially once I get my head strap in. Because, like, I might 3D print a head and it will technically fit. It will fit on the head base. But with how I do my head straps, it might not necessarily fit once it's done, you know? And that was partially the case for the Skulldog I did. It fits, despite being a huge Skulldog. It is a very big Skulldog head. I find that it fits me a little snugly, and not particularly comfortably. So I don't know that I am a fan. It would fit better if the head was wider and shorter. But I have a very narrow noggin. I am a little person with a very small noggin. Which is interesting to think about. I don't know, I guess. But, I think I would definitely do a Skulldog again with what I've learned. The other issue I have with 3D printing heads is I am not good at 3D modeling. And if I'm going to make and sell 3D printed heads, I want to design my own, you know, or at least hire someone to make one of my designs. You know, like I would draw out a reference sheet to model off of. But as it stands, I am not good at it. At all. Terrible, actually. But that's okay, you know, like... So, like, the hardest part for me is getting, like, the eye blanks to fit nicely and stuff like that. 'Cause I know nothing about 3D modeling and such. I know how to take what I see on a piece of paper and make it work out of foam. And if I mean, I could, but it's very expensive. I would make foam casts. I would make silicone molds of head bases that I am particularly proud of and fond of, if I could. But again, they're very expensive to do, and not necessarily easy to do either. Which I have used a expanding foam head base. In the past, I purchased one from West Customs, and it was a very nice head base. It worked really well for the commission, because the commissioner had requested that base in particular. I am personally not a fan of expanding foam in general, though. I know it varies quite a bit depending on what kind of foam you get and how well it's actually implemented, if it's used properly when they are filling the molds, stuff like that. But based off of the few head bases I have seen, the issue that's consistent with... The neighbors are bumping their bass. The issue that I find with the expanding foam head bases is that hot glue does not like sticking to them. You really have to score and sand down the outside of an expanded base to get it to fit nicely, which is a little silly, if you ask me. That seems like a lot of work for something that's not supposed to be a lot of work. But they do look nice, and it is nice to not have to start from scratch every single time. That being said, I also really, really like the uniqueness that comes from a hand-built base. Like, all of my head bases are... I say all. That's not true. 90% of my head bases are hand-carved from foam. with the exceptions being the one I ordered for a commissioner that was a expanding foam base, and that Skulldog Premade I did recently. I also have a Premade that is just a half mask that I am particularly fond of. I see a lot of people complaining about fursuits being expensive. A lot. Especially newer furs, younger furs, and even some adult furs. And the unfortunate matter is that fursuits are expensive. Not in the way that they are poorly made, necessarily, and not worth the money, but in the fact that they are expensive to make. The materials themselves are expensive. You know, you don't hire a contractor to build your house and expect it to cost $2,000 to build an entire 4-bedroom house, you know, because lumber is expensive, and putting in the electrical and the plumbing is expensive, you know? So of course, getting a house built is expensive. And the unfortunate thing is, with everything going on, fur fabrics, fleece, between Joann's going out of business, other businesses not having certain materials, inflation, increase in taxing and fees on these materials, stuff isn't as cheap as it once was, even 2 years ago. I am paying significantly more in material costs now than when I first started making fursuits. And that is for a lot of reasons. Despite doing as much as I can to keep my costs from increasing, while also maintaining quality and increasing quality, there's only so much I can do. Like, I switched foams a couple years ago. I switched from one kind of foam to another. The foam I use now, I will never switch back to the old foam. The old foam was so cheap in comparison, and it was cheap. It was half the price for probably about 3/4 of the amount of foam. So it's not super bad. Like, you get less foam for less money, but it's not so much where it's like half off, you know? It's not equivalent. The newer foam is a little bit more expensive, but I get more at a time. I also buy a lot of my stuff in bulk to save on costs. Specifically to save on the differences in the quality costs. Because when I don't do that, things are extremely more expensive. Like, ordering fursuit fur, right? I have multiple commissions coming up this year that I've known about for months. So as the first one was coming up, I ordered the fur for 3 separate commissions. I ordered 20 yards of fur fabric, and it cost me about $60 in shipping for all 3 of those commissions. I didn't get any discounts on the fur itself, but I did save money on shipping, because normally, if I had ordered those 3 commissions separately, those 20 yards, you know, in 6 or 10 yard batches, whatever, I would have ended up paying at least $30 in shipping per commission, which is at least $30 more in expenses just to get the materials, you know? Not to mention, like, I've also changed the thread I use in the last 2 years, and while this thread isn't necessarily that much more expensive, I also buy this thread in bulk. I've always bought my thread in bulk because I go through a lot of it. This thread is about 2 cents more every 10 yards. So it's 0.002 cents more every yard. That's not a math. Yeah. So instead of being, that is math, yeah. Math is hard. But that adds up, you know? I don't use 10 yards of thread in a suit. I use upwards of 500 yards in a suit. Every single suit. And some suits, like this one, have a lot more sewing to them because they have a lot more details. And depending on whether it's hand sewn versus machine sewn, what stitches I'm using for what parts, you know, like these are just getting a straight stitch. They're in the hand paws. They don't need to be double stitched, they just need to be straight stitched. And a straight stitch uses less thread than a blanket stitch, but a blanket stitch allows for more flat laying fur and flexibility in the material. So it really depends on what part of the suit I'm sewing, how much thread I'm actually going to use, how many details there are, things like that. So eventually that 2 1,000ths of a cent, well no, those 2/10ths of a cent, I swear I know numbers, adds up. Because if it's 2 cents every 10 yards, and I'm using 500, that's an extra $1 for at least 500, which again, not a lot, but add that on to the price of shipping and inflation and upgrading the materials I use, it does add up over time. Not to mention, I still have to live. I still have to live off of this is my job, as much as it is also my hobby. Suits simply are expensive to make, and they take a lot of time to make. But I also understand that everything is expensive now, not just the luxury items like a suit. People don't need fursuits, but people do need to pay their rent, and people do need to be able to buy groceries. And even that is getting difficult. You know, everything's expensive. So I understand where people are coming from when they're saying it's too expensive for me to get a suit, and they are bummed out by that, you know? So I wanted to make a option for a suit that fills the need of getting a fursuit head, at least somewhat, while also not being as expensive. You know, being a lot more customizable to be as expensive as you can afford or less expensive. You know, like if you can't afford one of my fursuit heads because they're too high priced for what some people can afford, but you can afford one of the masks because they are significantly cheaper, then that might be a good alternative. They also function really well for those who can't wear fursuit heads because of medical conditions, or because of claustrophobia, or just sensory needs in general. There's a lot of people that don't like being inside a fursuit head, or can't be inside a fursuit head. It's a great alternative for that. And I haven't really seen too many masks that are toony like a fursuit. You know, I've seen a lot of realistic masks and Therian style masks that are flat, you know, like they don't have much as far as a muzzle goes, and if they do, it's, you know, like this big. And a lot of them are just painted masks, like a dino mask, and that's fine, you know, that's great. But I still want something furred and toony with fursuit eyes in them, you know, that fursuit look and feel, while also giving a more affordable and accessible alternative. So I designed a fursuit mask that is smaller than a fursuit head. It is just a half mask, so it only, you know, it might cover to here, but the bottom is entirely open. There is no back to it. It is just a mask. and it's a pre-made pattern, so it takes less time for me to make, therefore I can charge less for it. Kind of like I said, a hand paws. Hand paws are usually fairly easy because I can just trace a pattern I already have for hand paws and put those on whatever fabrics I need. I can't do that for fursuit heads. Fursuit heads are from scratch every time, and they take a long time. So, and like the masks are customizable. You know, like I said, they have no backs to the heads, but that's the baseline. That is as small as it can get. You can get one that has a hood or just the back of the head. You can get one where it has the full top. You can get one where it's the mask with the back and it comes down over the shoulders like a, you know, like a hood. A cape, almost. You can do things like the removable fans or the follow me versus the toony eyes. Like there's so many options that are available in the masks that are also available in my fursuit heads. I tried to get as many of them as possible to translate between the two. Just because I want it to be what people want out of a fursuit head while giving a cheaper option, a cheaper opportunity, alternative. And I would like to make more of them. There are some tweaks I have to make with what I used for my first pre-made. The first one is, of course, the first one. You know, like it's got its flaws. It was a big learning curve, as most things are. So there's some things that I personally don't like about it. Which actually I can show you because he's right over here in the corner. Would you come here? There we go. My biggest thing that I don't like is the nose. And I think some people would disagree with me on that. Because watch your Tootsie, Forrest. Watch your Tootsie. This is the mask. And as you can see, it looks fairly nice. I like it. I don't like some things about it. For example, he sits like this on your head. And I wish that his muzzle wasn't sloped downwards so much. I need to modify it so that way his muzzle sits up a little higher, or at least his head tilts more like this. I would rather he sat like this than like this, you know? Because I feel like you constantly look like you're looking down with him like this. And I think a lot of that is because, like, this forward tilt is because this dome shape is not high enough. The nose is another thing. I think his nose is simultaneously too big and too flat. It is a very large round nose, which is fine. It's still cute, but I wish I had more actual definition, a shape to the nose, and that it was somewhat smaller. But overall, I am really proud of how this one turned out for my first ever half mask. And, you know, he's not... You can get lining if you wanted lining in it. You could get, like I said, the back of the head. You could get a full neck, all that stuff. And, you know, you can put it on like a hat, drop it down. You can still breathe because all of this is open, you know? Like, it's not bad. It's just not necessarily what I wanted out of a suit, out of a mask. So there's still learning to be done with it. I might try to do... I'm going to try a couple different things with this mask. Not that one in particular, but with this pattern. I might even sell a copy of the pattern for people to use. Again, because I want it to be affordable for people to get the suits they want. I want people to be able to have that option, to have the suits that they wish they could have. So it's a lot of trial and error. Everything's trial and error. This has been a very depressing sounding stream today. And I promise it's not meant to be that way, but it's really hot in here and I'm really tired. And I am also talking to nobody but myself today. So it's kind of just me rambling the thoughts that are in my head for whoever's willing to listen. We did not get very far selling these, but I do think that I am about done with stream today, which again sounds really aggressive. But it is really hot in here. We're getting to that time of day where the sun is all the way up and our AC is not blowing into this room, so it is just not cool in here. The living room, I'm sure, is plenty cold. But I can't stream in the living room, so I'm going to move all of this out there, hang out, watch some TV while I sew, hopefully cool off, and get some dinner, because it is dinner time for me right now. And hopefully on Monday I'll be a bit more chipper. Chipper sounding, at least. I promise I'm not as blech as I sound today, but it's hard to talk to people that don't technically exist right now. You know, like I'm again talking to nobody. I'm talking to you. You're not nobody, but you're also in the future. So, future, history, current, past. I don't know. I'll see you guys on Monday.